very warm welcome to all colleagues and friends. I'm very honored and happy that after 10 years of serving the IASSW Board, International Association of the Schools of Social Work Board of Directors, have the opportunity to greet you here in Ljubljana. And as it is one of our international service in any parts of the world that we come is to organize a regional symposium or a conference where people from the region can meet.
Social work is standing on. One is the science and the profession contributing to social justice and human rights, and the other is the science of the processes, of the how to do it. And you see the word you use against social suffering, social working alliance. I think it's also the best possible definition of a social worker do, of the social work profession, to be an ally, a respectful and responsible ally of people who come to help, for changes in the world, who are always experts in experience. So what we need is to recognize their strengths, their talent, their abilities, but also to create dialogues, relationships, co-creating relationships in the process, who make changes possible on the very personal level and who make changes possible in the society, in the world.
We have drafted several other materials. Unfortunately, they haven't been adopted yet by the Parliament. And I think you will talk about it. Act or legislation on independent living, personal assistance, and act on social inclusion of persons with intellectual disabilities. We do hope that the drafts will be discussed within the ministry, with NGOs, with professionals, these two acts within these years, and that they will be adopted by the Parliament till the end of the year 2013 or 2014. The issue, the topic you will discuss today and tomorrow is very important for persons with disabilities. There were several researches done, they have been done by different international organizations like ESPT, like EFC on the impact of austerity measures adopted by governments on the quality of life. And so we know that the time of economic and financial crisis and also time of moral crisis have impact on the quality of life. Unfortunately, the finances being dedicated to this field, to this topic, policies, have been reduced, and of course it has very severe impact. Therefore, I do hope you will discuss this issue. I do hope you will inform the ministry and civilian professionals on the issue.
Quite many things were done by the ministry in these areas, but we are still not satisfied. And this is also one of the reasons why this conference is here today.
Across Europe, the traditional relationships between governments and citizens are being transformed by neoliberal ideology. The resulting changes are providing many challenges for social workers and their service users as they are confronted with the consequences of some of the most brutal aspects of global capitalism. The role of the social worker has become strongly influenced by managerialism and by neoliberal ideology, which often contradict the values and knowledge that underpin professional social work. Social workers are now increasingly working within quasi-market conditions as they endeavour to empower service users and ensure active service user participation. However, the adoption of new practices does not appear to be happening at the same rate or in the same way across European countries. This creates a need to understand and, when necessary, to seek opportunities to challenge inappropriate policies and practice. In addition, when considering the impact of these changes on the social work curriculum, academics should question whether, in this changing social order, they are educating students to become compliant agents of social policies, or whether they are providing sufficiently critical frameworks and new knowledge to enable students to challenge neoliberal ideas in a transformative and positive way for the benefit of our service users.
So when we are looking at people who are challenged both physically and mentally, it's a dual problem. Not only are we social workers facing issues of poverty, increasing poverty around the world, of increasing discrimination, of increasing conflicts, wars. Can you imagine, as social workers, as social work educators, the kinds of issues, the complexities within these issues that we have to really analyze and work with. And in addition to that, we have people who are challenged, who become disabled because of wars, because of conflicts, and it's increasing day by day. So we really have a great responsibility, both as teachers and practitioners around the globe. In terms of the population of people with disabilities in India, we have, according to our 2001 census, 2.13%, but it has increased to 4 to 5% in 2011. So it is showing that even with development, the numbers of people with disability do not reduce. India is an emerging economy. It is developing, but the numbers of people are increasing. And they survive with a lot of deprivations in their lives. We have social attitudes and stigma which limit opportunities of our people. I think we are all familiar with these deprivations, and this is happening in many countries of the world, I am sure. But India boasts of one of the most progressive disability policy frameworks in the developing world. The challenge is to operationalize this policy. So the key messages of the report are that community and society as a whole would benefit with a full participation of people living with disability. And we have in India a growing, vibrant disability rights movement and NGOs, civil society involvement in service delivery. What we need to focus on is getting the basics right on disability policy.
Let me recall you that when in 1955, when the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Slovenia decided to open the School of Social Work, they also made, the communists also made the definition, what is social work? They called it socialist social work. And the goal of that socialist social work was to execute the aims of the official social policy. This was what the social workers were supposed to do. So this was the top-down definition which should serve the people from the bottom up. Isn't this a great paradox? And this characteristic of social work never really disappeared, vanished from the social work mainstream practices in this country and also not in other countries of Eastern Europe. In the late 80s, a slow and incomplete emancipation of social workers in relation to the state took place, and some social worker in practice and also social work educators from the school became a driving force for the societal transformations from a mono toward the multiple party system. If this transformation really also changed the attitudes towards the human beings, this is another question. 2 days ago, I returned from the International Doctoral School, which I'm the chair of, from the neighboring country, Austria, where a loud public announcement at the Vienna train station caught my attention. People with restricted mobility have special assistance and support on all trains and around the train station. It didn't hit me primarily because of the fact that the level of support for mobility is higher than in Slovenia, but because people with impairments were called with a simple name, people with whose mobility is restricted. Die Leute mit begrenzter Mobilität. While in Slovenia, they are still called invalids. I felt the border among the two countries, which since 2004 have no borders anymore. The invalid is defined as someone who is incapable of leading independent life and is dependent either from the family members or from the state. Invalids are the holders of a stigmatized identity. It is nothing ordinary, positive, or desirable in the word invalid. Why can Austrians do it and we can't? Why do post-communist countries across Eastern Europe still call people with disabilities invalids? The perception of who or what is a person with disability is historically, socially, and politically produced and is a consequence of the social policy system, mentality, lobbies and power structures within different countries. The way how one country defines an individual person, a collective, and a humanity is different from another country, even if there are no borders between them. Several user-led organizations in the last 15 years actually do fight for the right for self-determination and personal assistance. And we have several numbers of people about whom Elena will speak later, who do have personal assistance instead of being locked in large institutions. And this is probably the biggest thing that happened in the last 20 years. But unfortunately, this is still something that is not part of the legislation. This is an exception. This is something that people have to be happy about, and we really hope, and I think there is a huge need that this becomes part of the ordinary arrangement for persons with disabilities. In 2010, the first house for women with physical impairments who experience violence were built in one of the small towns, Slovenske Konjice. Although the first women's refuge was opened in 1996 in Slovenia, it took 15 years that also the whole women movement, feminist awareness, recognized the fact that violence are experienced by women with disabilities too. Not only that, we know from other researches, and we are working on the Slovenian one, that actually women with disabilities experience more violence than non-disabled women. But it actually, the lack of awareness that it is interesting. And people with disabilities are still defined as vulnerable group, instead of being seen as active citizenship. Not only to speak about the consumers and so on. If we look at the countries of Eastern Europe, in Central Asia, there are literally no governmental funds for organizations for persons with disabilities. Literally no state funds. Most of the money are coming from from abroad. And Elena Yanskaya and myself, we went to Kyrgyzstan in September, and we saw wonderful user-led organizations run by mothers, run by women, but with the money that comes from outside, and the government has absolutely no interest to look at the funds and to support these people. And this is really another big problem. But at the same time, what we have within the European Union and the Eastern Europe is a very strong ideology on mainstreaming work. Work is one of the human rights. The right to work is one of the human rights issue. But at the same time, the whole issue of people with disabilities should go into the in some work facilities can be another issue too. Because when we look at where people with disabilities actually work, what type of work they do, how much money they get, we can see that actually this is not an emancipation, but it is a kind of 19th century type of workhouses that are getting established. So one of the leading disability activists from Bulgaria, Kapka Panayotova, she said, they make us talk about employment to prevent us to talk about more important things. With more important things, she meant living outside of the institutions, getting destigmatized images, getting in other mainstream facilities. Because nevertheless, although we know that the right to work is and has been for a long time one of the fight of the persons of the disability activist movement, but this shouldn't be the end of the story.
I would like to talk about the cultural construction of disability in Russia, Soviet legacies and new images. And by this theoretical concept, cultural construction, I understand the process of the production and revision of symbolic meanings that are produced and revised by different institutions and actors in changing social, economic, cultural and political circumstances. And they're shaped by discourses and visual images and are used to mark the borders of normality and therefore in more broader sense of citizenship. This set of images, a system of symbolic meanings, is constituted and it's elaborated also by the visual means, as I already said. And I would like to focus in this research, and this research was done together by me and Pavel, whom you saw already. And we base our study on the analysis of feature films and documentary and some posters as well. And these visual materials are derived from the just open sources, feature films, just from collection, and also documentary films. So we studied at a special documentary archive in Moscow suburb.
That what I will talk about is just a peak of the iceberg, because majority of the mainstream of the social services in our area are still strictly institution-based. Many of you were referring to this today. Majority of our services are the mainstream, is the institutions. Many of people with disabilities and with mental health problems are living in large institutions. The other problem is that majority of the resources are spent on these institutions. If I consider the budget of Hungary, the money we spend on social services for disabled people or for people with mental health problems, we will find that more than 80% of the public money is spent on these institutions. Very strong biomedical approaches. The other issue is the finance. We have very underfinanced services. No full coverage, So it means that maybe we can find some services, maybe we can find some very impressive services, but we couldn't say, and we can't say, that we can find them all over at every corner and is a full access to everyone who lives with disability. To be honest, most of the people are simply abandoned in the community, and we have some services around. This is the Hungarian figures. These are the Hungarian figures. When it comes to state finance, we think everything is solved. No, nothing is solved. Majority of the services are financed by 40–60% of the real cost, which is coming from the state, and it seems it's your business how you establish the remaining part of your budget, year by year, every 20 years after the system change in these countries. Project countries, very typical issue. Many countries are running projects, and that's what they call social service system. When there is a Western European finance partner, a grant-making organization, a huge European Union project, then there will be services until the project is lasting. Then everything is dismissed, and they refer to that maybe if there will be a next project, we will start something new, and this is not a part of the public thinking even, that this is the duty of the state and the country, not the European Union business is that how you deal with disabled persons, and a country can't live on projects only. This is a very serious issue in our countries also. Personally for me, the problematic attitude is the biggest obstacle. We have to face with the fact that we consider ourselves as helping professionals, but in fact our majority of our services are punitive. People are not enjoying living in a large institution. They are sentenced to live in a large institution, even if we consider ourselves this is a social service which is supposed to help people. We have very over-regulated systems. I always say in our region, we are not solving problems, we are fulfilling duties, we are following legislations or protocols. This is an issue in Western Europe also. Very weak influence of consumer movements. I am very happy here today that I could hear real representatives of the user movement, and before I saw even in the field of mental health that here in Ljubljana there are very strong movements, so this is a quite good, outstanding example. But for example in Budapest, in Hungary, we face professionalism as a colonization of the entire field. When it comes to language, when it comes to terminology, and when it comes to power, everything is in the hand of the professionals. Lack of education and training, we have to face this despite of the fact that, again, the social work has been re-established in Hungary 20 years ago. But if we consider the entire field, we have, let's say, 60–70,000 workers in our field, and maximum 9–8,000 are educated, graduated, which means bachelor or master level social workers. This is the result of 20 years. How many more years we have to wait until the majority of the people, professionals working in the field, will be real educated people, not just caregivers.
The idea of social exclusion and inclusion has had a place in the political as well as in the academic debate, particularly in Western Europe for several decades actually. It has also been said that social exclusion and inclusion is at the core of social work practice. But on the other hand, it has also been said that there are quite some problems with those concepts, that terms such as inclusion and exclusion, integration and disintegration, discrimination, marginalization, convey very vague ideas about the social phenomena associated with them. And from the very beginning of the introduction of the term social exclusion and inclusion, criticism could be heard that the term inclusion did not really fulfill the promises it raised. Indeed, the introduction of the term inclusion into the debate on social inequality and social problems coincided with a turning point in Western economics, the Western labor market situation, and the deconstruction of the welfare state as we knew it, particularly in Western Europe. In other words, what we are talking about, if we talk about the term inclusion, is particularly Western experience and Western history. And I think it is still to be answered to what extent and particularly in what way these terms can be applied to other regions with different experiences regarding economic dynamics, the labor market development and social system. And I think what Daria and Elena said before points to that. They actually did describe different cultural dynamics, power dynamics, of course, and I think that these necessarily have to lead to a different discussion on inclusion and exclusion. So what it means is that if we use the terms exclusion and inclusion in social work discourses, we need to know what we are talking about. We need to know what we say when we say parts of the population are excluded, and we need to know what we mean by inclusion. So first, it is important to say, and it will become obvious later on why I'm emphasizing this so strongly, that there is a dialectical relationship between inclusion and exclusion. We cannot use one term without elucidating the other. And I think it is important to note that very often in the discussion nowadays, only inclusion is mentioned. And if we only talk about inclusion and not talk about exclusion at the same time, this has consequences. So this is not a trivial remark, and I will come back to that later on. Moreover, it is important to note that exclusion does not impose itself upon us. As Levitas said, the central question we have to ask is not what is social exclusion, because exclusion is not out there waiting for us to be detected. It's the other way around. Exclusion is a metaphor, a concept with which we try to explain phenomena we have chosen to perceive as socially significant. So how exclusion is defined is directly related with ideas of how the social world functions, and for this very reason we have different ideas and theories about what exclusion, social exclusion actually means. This may sound very theoretical, so why should it be important to practitioners? It is important because concepts and theories have a profound impact on how we understand the social world, and as a consequence on how we conceptualize social problem, and again how we conceptualize social problem has an impact on strategies of solution we choose.